The following morning, the palace hummed with activity. Princess Lyra moved through the corridors with careful grace, her mind sharp and alert. The message from the outer territories had not been idle warnings. Small disturbances had been reported along the border of Scythera, and scouts suggested that the faction opposing foreign influence might attempt to interfere with the human delegation. Lyra met Captain Marcus Hale in the royal audience chamber. He was already reviewing maps and communications, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Princess," he said without looking up, "the situation is more complicated than we expected. The faction is organized and they are prepared to act quickly. We need to anticipate their moves." Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of caution and admiration. Marcus's methodical approach impressed her. He did not panic, he did not demand authority, he analyzed, calculated, and prepared. She realized that his calm in the face of uncertainty was not unlike the training she herself had received, but it came naturally to him without ceremony. "We will go to the border territories ourselves," she said firmly. "I want to see this for myself, and I will need your guidance." Marcus looked up at her, a flicker of surprise in his expression. "Are you sure, Princess?" "It can be dangerous, I am sure," she replied. "I must know the truth, and I cannot act blindly from the palace." "Your assistance is appreciated, Captain, but I will not allow caution to limit me." The two of them traveled to the border in a sleek, hovering transport. Outside the windows, Scythera's landscape stretched in iridescent colors, forests of crystalline trees, rivers of liquid light, and mountains that floated just above the ground. It was beautiful. Yet the calm of the view contrasted sharply with the tension that Lyra felt. As they approached the reported site of disturbances, Marcus pointed to a small encampment hidden among the floating cliffs. "That is their base," he said quietly. "We need to gather information carefully before making any move." Lyra's hands tightened around the edge of her seat. She could feel her pulse quickening, but she forced herself to breathe steadily. Her mind ran through the strategies she had studied for years. Yet she also allowed herself to observe Marcus. Every movement he made, every choice he considered seemed deliberate and precise. She realized that she could learn from him even as a princess. The scouts' reports confirmed that the faction had prepared traps along the cliffs and set automated defenses. Lyra and Marcus planned their approach together, combining her knowledge of Scythera's technology with his human intuition. The first challenge came quickly. A bridge of light that led to the encampment flickered unpredictably, threatening to collapse. Lyra stepped forward instinctively, her body tense. She calculated the timing and motion required to cross safely. Marcus mirrored her movements, adjusting slightly for stability. They reached the other side, and the encampment lay before them, silent and watchful. Inside, they discovered signs of the faction's plans: maps, communication devices, and small weapons caches. Marcus knelt, examining the data, while Lyra observed quietly, noting the patterns and vulnerabilities. They moved with careful coordination, a silent partnership forming through shared focus and trust. Suddenly, an alarm blared. The faction had discovered their presence. Automated defenses activated and energy barriers began to descend from the cliffs. Marcus reacted first, leaping to disable a device with his tools. Lyra followed, using her knowledge of Scytheran technology to reroute the barrier's energy. The two of them worked seamlessly. Marcus relied on quick thinking and adaptability, while Lyra relied on strategy and precision. Together, they neutralized the immediate threats. When the danger passed, Lyra allowed herself a brief exhale of relief. She glanced at Marcus, who was brushing dust from his uniform. His expression was calm, almost amused by the intensity of the situation. She felt a small, unexpected smile tug at her lips. "You handled that very well," she said softly. "You too, Princess," he replied. "We make a good team." Lyra considered his words. She had been trained to rely on herself alone, to maintain control in every circumstance. Yet she realized that trust did not weaken control. It enhanced it. By working with Marcus, she had navigated the danger more effectively than she could have alone. Over the next several hours, they continued through the territory, facing both environmental hazards and small skirmishes with faction forces. Each challenge tested Lyra's composure and Marcus's adaptability. The princess found herself observing not only his tactics but his reactions to pressure. He remained calm, confident, and respectful. It was unusual, and it fascinated her. As the day drew to a close, they reached a cliff overlooking a luminous valley. Below, the faction forces were regrouping, unaware of the duo observing from above. Lyra turned to Marcus. "What do you suggest?" she asked. Marcus studied the scene carefully. "We can disrupt their organization without direct confrontation. If we disable their communication network, they will be disoriented. Then we can negotiate from a position of strength." Lyra nodded, impressed by the strategy. "Agreed. Let us proceed carefully." They moved swiftly and silently, Marcus disabling the faction's devices with precision while Lyra monitored the energy flows. When the final device was neutralized, the valley fell quiet. The faction forces were disoriented, giving the princess and the human soldier control of the situation without bloodshed. Lyra felt a sense of satisfaction, but also a deeper respect for Marcus. His courage was matched by intelligence, and his confidence was tempered by thoughtfulness. She realized that humans were not merely strong. They had a unique way of facing challenges that was different from Zitharan methods, but equally effective. As they prepared to return to the palace, Marcus turned to her. "Princess Lyra, you handled yourself remarkably today. I think your people would be fortunate to have you leading them in such times." Lyra felt warmth rise in her chest. She had always been trained to expect praise from advisors or teachers, but from him it felt different, genuine and earned. "Thank you, Captain," she said quietly. "Your guidance was invaluable. I would not have managed so well without your perspective." He smiled faintly. "Then we learned from each other. That is how progress is made, I believe." Lyra considered his words carefully. She had spent her life in rigid training, believing that success came from control and isolation. But today she had seen the power of cooperation, of trust, and of mutual respect. It was a lesson she would not forget. Back at the palace, the council awaited their report. Lyra presented the events calmly, outlining the strategy, the challenges, and the resolution. She spoke with authority, precision, and clarity. The council listened, impressed by her composure and the decisive action taken. After the meeting, she found Marcus waiting quietly in the garden. The soft light of Zithara's twin moons reflected off the crystalline fountains, casting shimmering patterns across the paths. "You handled yourself exceptionally," Marcus said again, this time with a touch of sincerity that was harder to ignore. "You remained composed, made quick decisions, and led with intelligence. I've rarely seen such calm in the face of unpredictability." Lyra allowed herself to meet his gaze fully, her previous tension easing. "I learned from you as well, Captain. Your courage and perspective helped me see a different approach. I realize now that control does not mean isolation, and calm does not mean detachment." A brief silence passed between them, comfortable yet charged with the acknowledgement of shared experience. Lyra felt a small but real sense of connection forming. It was not romance, it was respect, trust, and understanding. She realized that humans could inspire her not just with strength but with thoughtfulness and adaptability. The night deepened, and the palace became quiet. Lyra walked alone along the high terrace, reflecting on the day's events. She had faced danger, uncertainty, and the unpredictable nature of an alien faction. Yet she had remained calm, guided by her training, her intellect, and, unexpectedly, by the presence of a human soldier who had earned her respect. She understood now that her world was changing. Humans were no longer just visitors. They were capable partners, allies in ways she had not anticipated. And she as a princess had grown through this encounter, learning that true composure came not from rigid control but from understanding, cooperation, and trust. As she looked toward Marcus, who stood quietly at the edge of the terrace, she smiled genuinely for the first time in public. It was a small gesture, but it carried meaning, a recognition of partnership, respect, and the possibilities of unity between Zithara and Earth. The future was uncertain, and challenges would continue to arise. Yet Lyra felt ready, strengthened not only by her training but by the shared experiences with a human who had proven that courage, intelligence, and integrity could transcend worlds. And for the first time, Princess Lyra understood that being a leader meant more than maintaining composure. It meant learning, adapting, and sometimes trusting others in ways she had never allowed herself before. She had faced the challenge of the human soldier and found not only calm but insight, growth, and the potential for lasting alliance. The night air was cool, and the stars above Zythera shimmered like distant lanterns. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling peace she had never felt before in the strict confines of the palace. She had faced the unpredictable, embraced it, and found strength. And beside, Princess Lyra stood at the edge of the high balcony, her eyes tracing the glowing spires of Zithera's capital city below. The sky shimmered with soft hues of violet and gold, the sunlight reflecting off the crystalline towers. She had seen this view countless times in her life, yet today it seemed different. Her mind was restless. A human delegation was arriving, and among them was a soldier whose reputation had already reached her ears. Humans were unpredictable, her advisors said, and this particular one was said to be bold, intelligent, and unafraid of anyone, even a princess. Lyra's heart beat slightly faster. She had trained all her life to maintain composure. Every gesture, every expression, every word she spoke had been meticulously taught. Her teachers had drilled into her that emotions were dangerous in diplomacy. Yet now, standing there in her ceremonial robes, she felt an unfamiliar curiosity that tugged at the edges of her control. The doors to the balcony opened quietly behind her. A soft, measured voice spoke. "Princess Lyra, the delegation has arrived." Lyra turned, offering the faintest of smiles. "Thank you, Advisor Tarek, I will see them." She straightened her posture, letting the calm she had practiced for years settle over her like a second skin. Down below, the delegation landed in sleek silver ships that hummed softly against the violet sky. They moved with precision, yet there was something different in the way the humans carried themselves. They were not stiff or overly formal. They laughed softly among themselves, gestured with confidence, and looked around with wide, curious eyes. Lyra's gaze found the human soldier almost immediately. He stood slightly apart from the others, observing everything with sharp, alert eyes. His posture was relaxed, but there was an intensity about him, a quiet strength that seemed to radiate from his very presence. He did not bow deeply, nor did he fumble with the protocols of Zithera, yet he carried himself with respect. Lyra's lips pressed together. She had to remain calm. Her mind reminded her that a princess must not let her curiosity or admiration show. She inhaled deeply, letting the controlled rhythm of her breath guide her. When the humans were brought before the royal audience chamber, Lyra descended gracefully the staircase to meet them. The walls of the chamber were adorned with glowing panels that displayed Zithera's history, its wars, its victories, its brilliant leaders. It was a reminder of the responsibility she bore as a member of the royal family. The human captain approached, his steps measured but confident. As he stopped before her, Lyra noted his unusual eye color, a deep, almost liquid brown that seemed to observe everything without judgment. He extended his hand in greeting. "Princess Lyra," he said, his voice steady but warm. "I am Captain Marcus Hale, representing Earth." Lyra inclined her head slightly, her hand hovering in the air before she allowed herself to shake his. "Captain Marcus," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "Welcome to Zithera. I hope your journey was peaceful." Marcus smiled faintly. "It was, thank you. Your world is remarkable." Lyra blinked slightly, caught off guard. He had not flattered her, or made the usual diplomatic remarks that all visitors seem to learn by heart. He had spoken simply, sincerely, and it unsettled her in a way she could not yet name. The advisors beside her whispered softly, reminding her of her training. "Maintain composure. Do not be swayed by charm. Control every emotion." Lyra nodded subtly, silently agreeing with their guidance. During the initial discussions, Lyra observed Marcus carefully. Unlike other visitors, he asked questions that were precise and insightful. He did not rely on flattery or assumptions. He listened as much as he spoke, and he seemed genuinely interested in understanding Zithera rather than merely impressing its leaders. Yet, there was a part of Lyra that could not help, noticing small things, the way he furrowed his brow slightly when puzzled, the way he tilted his head when considering a problem, the way his presence seemed to fill the room with an understated energy. Every observation challenged her careful training. She was used to controlling the attention in the room, yet she found her focus drawn to him despite herself. A sudden incident interrupted the conversation. A piece of advanced Zitheran technology malfunctioned nearby. A hovering display panel flickered and sparked. The room tensed instantly. Several advisors stepped back, unsure how to contain the situation, their movements careful and hesitant. Without a word, Marcus moved forward. He analyzed the device quickly, his fingers deftly manipulating its controls. Within moments, he stabilized the panel, preventing it from collapsing entirely. A murmur of relief passed through the chamber. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. No one had moved with such decisiveness, nor had anyone outside the Royal Engineers dared approach the malfunctioning technology so boldly. "Impressive," Lyra said softly, masking the surprise in her voice. Marcus glanced up, meeting her gaze with steady eyes. "It's nothing, Princess. Just a problem that needed fixing." Lyra's mind raced. Here was a human who acted without fear, who relied on skill rather than ceremony, who faced problems directly. It was both fascinating and dangerous. She felt a spark of admiration but forced herself to remain composed. She could not let it show. After the incident, the discussions continued, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Lyra noticed the way her own heart seemed to beat a little faster, the way she found herself studying Marcus more closely than was proper. She reminded herself that she was a princess, that her duty was above curiosity or personal interest. The meeting concluded, and the humans were escorted to their quarters. Lyra returned to her private chambers, her mind still restless. She walked to the large window and stared out at the city below. The glowing towers seemed dim compared to the storm of thoughts in her mind. Tarek, her advisor, entered quietly. "Princess, you handled yourself well. Captain Hale is unusual, but you maintained your composure." Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes, I did, but he is unlike any visitor I have ever encountered. I must understand him, yet not allow myself to be distracted." Tarek's expression was unreadable. "Humans are unpredictable, Princess. That is why you must always stay in control. Curiosity is natural, but do not let it compromise your duty." Lyra inhaled deeply, centering herself. She had trained her whole life for this moment. Not a battle or a speech, but a test of restraint, of patience, of inner strength. She would observe Marcus, she decided, but she would remain the calm, composed princess that Zithara expected. That evening, the palace halls were quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the glowing lights. Lyra wandered through the corridors, her thoughts on the human soldier. She wondered what drove him, what experiences had shaped him, and why he carried himself with such confidence. She felt a strange mix of respect and caution, admiration and wariness. The next morning, she was called to a private council. A message had arrived from one of the outer territories of Zithara. There was political unrest, a faction that opposed foreign interference, and they had sent warnings about the human delegation. Lyra read the message carefully, her mind sharpening. The challenge ahead was not merely diplomatic. It would test her ability to maintain calm under pressure, to judge Marcus's abilities and to act decisively. She prepared herself, donning the ceremonial robes once more, but this time with a renewed sense of purpose. She would observe, she would judge, and she would act, but always with the poise and clarity of mind that her people expected. When Marcus appeared later that day, Lyra felt a strange tension in the air. He was relaxed, smiling faintly as he approached, but she noticed the subtle alertness in his movements. He had likely sensed the political tension as well. "Princess Lyra," he said, inclining his head respectfully, "I hear there may be challenges today. Are you prepared?" Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Challenges are always present, Captain. One must face them with clarity and calm." Marcus nodded. "Then we shall face them together." Lyra felt a flicker of something she had not allowed herself to feel before, a spark of trust. But she pushed it aside, reminding herself that a princess must never rely solely on another. No matter how capable, as the day unfolded, Lyra would observe Marcus more closely than ever, measuring his reactions, his judgment, and his courage. She would test herself as well, ensuring that she remained composed, thoughtful, and wise. And as the sun dipped below the floating towers, casting long shadows across the palace, Lyra realized that this encounter was unlike any she had ever faced. It was not a battle of armies or a test of intellect alone. It was a challenge to her very self, a subtle trial of restraint, judgment, and understanding. For the first time, she wondered whether humans were not merely unpredictable, but perhaps capable of inspiring something in her that went beyond protocol or duty. And as she looked toward the human soldier standing quietly in the distance, she understood that the true challenge had only just begun.